Hello, everyone. This time I'm in conversation with Samantha Blanco, who's joining me from the University of Florida, where she has worked with Professor Luis, whom we spoke to a couple of weeks ago about his interior design architecture virtual exchange. Samantha, before we get stuck in, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, and what you're studying, and just a little bit.
Gotcha. So, hi, thank you for having me today. I am Samantha Blanco, as previously stated. I'm a junior at the University of Florida, and I'm studying interior design with a minor in landscaping architecture. And when I took this course with Luis and did this project, I was a sophomore at the time.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, Luis said you enjoyed the project. So, he told me he's done it 2 or 3 times. There was a restaurant to design, there was a hotel lobby to design. Which one did you have
mhm.
to design?
So we actually got the museum program, which was
That sounds
really
really fun.
crazy for our second studio project ever, and the scale was very large, but honestly, with that type of program, it allowed us to mold the space in such a creative way. So I think it was actually a wonderful project to have something to do with the culture of Cali, Colombia and such. So yes.
Okay, so I will ask you in more detail about that.
Mhm.
What did so Luis and Edgar put you into groups. So who did you end up in a group with? How was your group dynamics? Was it working quite well?
So in our studios at UF, we were set in a group just for purposes of asking the students at Cali some questions and such. So we kind of conversed with each other and we're like, okay, these would be great questions to ask. How do we, make sure we're pulling stuff from our project into our conversation to make sure that we're representing Cali in the best way possible, but also showing different and immersive experiences to do that. And then we would reach out to the students either via WhatsApp, or I think some groups did like Zoom calls, and we would kind of just discuss back and forth about like our projects and like where they were at and what they were seeing and like where we were going to go with our project, because I believe they were a little further ahead at their time and we were kind of still in our preliminary stages getting started. So they were just like telling us, they're like, oh, we're so excited to see like what you guys end up doing with it and such. And so it was really fun going back and forth and like updating them and such. So yeah.
Luis and Edgar told me they had a one iteration where students were required to design the interior of a restaurant, the American students for Cali, Colombia, and vice versa. Now, you've said you had to design a museum space, which sounds immense to me. Tell me, where did you start with that? That sounds like an immense project, but kind of fun.
Yes, it was definitely daunting when we first got the program. I remember everyone was just looking at each other, we're like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna tackle this? We're such new students and we don't have that much experience. But the way I started approaching it was like analyzing our floor plan, seeing what we can do with the space, seeing where, let's say, high real estate areas are, which would be by the windows. But then you also have to take into consideration in a museum, you want to control as much of the experience as possible. So it was kind of really about molding that interior architecture to facilitate like the needs for the program. So I had in mind, I had 3 or 4 separate like main exhibits, and my idea was a journey through Cali, Colombia. So how do we see Cali from the grand scope down to the more intimate details of their city and of their culture? And it just begun with research about Cali, really, like seeing what they as a people, love to experience and just the heart of their city. And so I started from the El Rio Cauca and I went down into the overall like larger aspect of their city. And then I got a little bit closer and went into a market and then into a festival and then just into a gallery of, their art and like their history and such. So it really was about analyzing them and seeing how, as I said before, how we could like best represent them and educate like different communities about their culture and who they are.
So, what were the boundaries? What did Edgar and Luis tell you that I mean, was the museum open? It could have been a museum on anything, or did it have to be a museum about your respective cities and cultures?
So everyone was tasked with representing Cali, Colombia, And it was done in a sense where they wanted us, like, they gave us a program saying we needed a certain amount of exhibits, we needed to include like a market, we needed to include like a reception, customer service, so they gave us kind of a loose program of what they wanted, and then it was really up to us to implement it the way we best saw fit. Um, and so that is kind of where we went there. And so I think having everyone with the same city was actually really interesting because you got to see everyone's different creative expression, like how they
Lovely.
interpreted the city. And they really wanted us to like drive home on Cali, Colombia's like biodiversity and like just like their vibrancy. And
Mm.
so just seeing how everyone kind of explored that and highlighted certain like areas, things that I didn't consider someone else highlight. I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful idea. That's so wonderful. And so I think that was like having everyone do the same city was actually really nice because you got to just see a whole, scale of expression.
So, Samantha, your end product, what did it consist of? Was it an actual solid model, or was it an online interactive thing? What did you come up with in the end?
So
I'm
thank
dying to
goodness we
see
didn't
it.
have to build a 3D model because that would have been a lot. But we didn't build a physical model, but we did build in a software called SketchUp, and we used another software called AutoCAD to kind of develop our plan. And so that was kind of it's a 3D and 2D software, but we used it for its 2D purposes of making a plan. We brought that into SketchUp, and then we lifted everything from there to make it our 3D motion. We sourced furniture, we sourced materials. It was a lot, and so our final presentation consisted of including our floor plans and like a 3D isometric of our overall model, renders, explanations about like our process and our project, our ideas behind our materials, behind our furniture and such. And so it was kind of just a board presentation consisting of the process from start to end.
It sounds really fab. I want to, I want to have a go at that. I don't know anything about architecture, but absolutely fantastic. So I
It was
can see you
wonderful.
really love doing it. What was the best part of this creative process for you? What did you enjoy the most?
Honestly, the best part of this project was being thrown into the deep end, I guess you can say. And so,
Right out of your
respectfully, of
comfort
course.
zone.
Yes. And so it truly did push me out of my comfort zone because designing something like a museum, it has so much weight to it. 30-foot ceilings is a lot to work with. And so it's like, how do we push and pull those moments? How do we make the experience, smaller? How do we compress and enlarge those types of like visual aspects? And so for me, I really loved like having my idea of design pushed further, especially being new into the program at that time. I think it was like a really good way to kind of like get an overall feel of the environment. And not only that, but having the opportunity to collaborate with the students from Cali was like really inspiring as well because we got to see how they approach design too. Because they did one part of the project, and I guess you can say like we took it further, or I think it was vice versa, that we started doing certain parts of the project and they picked it up from there. But it was just really, and it like just really inspirational to see, how we could represent them and their thoughts behind it. And I remember like Luis telling us that they showed them and they were just all in awe and they loved it. They're so happy. And so I don't know, that type of connection for me was one of my favorite parts because I still talk about it to this day. If I'm, let's say, talking to a recruiter or even someone who's just like looking at one of my projects, they're like, oh wow, this is an interesting project. I was like, yes, we got to collaborate with students in Colombia. It was amazing. It was phenomenal. So I'm really grateful for Luis and Edgar in that moment to like allow us to do that.
I'm getting goosebumps because I'm really feeling through the through cyberspace your absolute enthusiasm. So, before I let you get on with your day, what did you learn about yourself? Apart from, yeah, you got thrown in at the deep end and you had an enormous complex space to deal with, and you
Mhm.
did that. So I guess that was some kind of satisfaction. But what do you think you learned about yourself during this whole thing?
Honestly, I learned to trust the process with myself, if that makes sense. I was very nervous because that project was also the last project before our selective admission process at UF, which is known as pinup. And so that project was going to be like the star of the show that like professors would review to see if you like, you know, you move on to the next phase of the design program. So during that project, I learned to kind of trust myself and in my abilities and what my professors have taught me as well. Because, you know, I love to absorb information. I love to push myself. I love to get critical feedback. And so I kind of just learned, you know, we all start somewhere and we all end somewhere. And like in between, you know, you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to trip, but you know, it's just how you pick yourself up is like what truly defines you as a designer, I feel. Because you know, you're always gonna get feedback that you might not like, but it's either you can internalize that and let that get you down, or internalize that and apply it to your next phase. And so I don't know, I think that's kind of what I learned is like trust the process and that you'll end up where you're supposed to end up.
I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yes,
And I
of
promise I'll
course.
stop. Has this experience impacted on decisions you might make about future study or future employment? Do you think? Has it kind of broadened your perspectives or made you think, oh, maybe I'll go abroad or?
Yes, I really believe it has. I have always wanted to go work in Spain for a short period of time, and you know, I believe through like the collaboration with the students in Cali, like that showed me that I really do want to have that type of collaboration amongst culture, that collaboration amongst people. And I definitely want to work for a firm that allows that to happen, where we can connect with multiple modes of people and we can express, you know, what our client wants and what, you know, they see and they visualize. So I think it really has affected me in that way. I definitely do want to like go abroad and work and such, and then you know see how many different people I can meet and everything. So yeah,
Well, best of luck in the future, Samantha, and
thank
thank you so
you.
much for your time today. It's been such a wonderful chat.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.